We'll get back on schedule and get going again. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. And our next presenter will be Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Secretary Raffensperger, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Chairman Tillery, Chairman England, committee. Thank you for letting us come and discuss the proposed amended 22 and fiscal 23 budgets here today. I understand this is just the opening session, so we'll have other opportunities to get together. As you know, our budget covers several divisions: corporations, elections, professional licensing, investigations, and securities and charities. There's been some realignment of personnel that I will go into in more detail surrounding the cemeteries. And like all parts of Georgia's government, the biggest budget change involves the raise for employees. And in the amended budget, we are getting desperately needed vehicles to replace much of our aging fleet of vehicles for investigations. Thank you. Outside of that, we are essentially flat in our operational budget. I will go through each division and outline our priorities and challenges. First up is corporations. You may notice that there are no state dollars going to fund this important division. We are 100% self-funded. That is from expedite fees paid by users. A bit over $400,000 of state dollars was removed during the round of cuts as we prepared to deal with COVID. That said, we will be doing the pay raises that are proposed in the budget for the 48 positions we have in this division as a matter of fairness for those employees. It will run us about $390,000 to match that raise. Corporations has been running smoothly while we made many upgrades, including the allowing for the multi-year renewals. That was the fruit of legislation I sponsored when I was in the House. And with my colleagues that supported that legislation, I want to thank you again. It was very well received by business owners. In fiscal 2021, 118,400 businesses renewed using the multi-year option. Like you, we want to make doing business as easy as possible here in Georgia, and this is part of that process. In the last fiscal year, despite COVID, we saw record new corporation formation with 345,503 new filings. I think that's awesome, and I know you do too. That is an 82% increase over fiscal year 2020 and a 112% increase over fiscal 2019. This office processed a total of all corporation filings of 1,414,301. That is obviously a record number. And our team did this with no state dollars allocated. Further, this division has brought in approximately $50 million so far for state coffers in the fiscal year. These numbers point to the fact we have a strong entrepreneurial population who want to pursue their dreams in the best state in which to do business, and our office is doing all we can to make that a reality. And I want to thank Anika Walker, my Director of Corporations, and her team for doing such a great job. Next up is our professional licensing division. We have 42 licensing boards that currently license 544,969 people in various trades and professions. COVID has provided many unique challenges to the work being done in this division. The pandemic has drastically increased the workload here as thousands of Georgians are looking to change their career. Because of this, we are seeing record applications. There's already been growth because of population gain, but the pandemic just kicked it into high gear. We have seen a growth of applications from approximately 1,100 applications per week to now an average of approximately 1,500 per week. While we have imposed policies and procedures to issue record numbers of licenses each week, the volume is continuing to grow. To echo Governor Kemp's comment this morning, Georgia is number 1 in quit rate, number 2 in separation rate, and number 3 for job openings. This dynamic is especially true for PLB. The raises will help, but likely won't be enough to close the gap alone. My team saw the situation and began a process of analysis and assessment to outline what we will need in a new technological system. That is an ongoing process that will help with getting Georgians to work. Through policy changes, we are already seeing a drop of over 20% for applications between 60 to 90 days. The vast majority of the issues we see are incomplete filings by applicants. Our plan is to have our upgraded processing plan help to head off those issues and get the applicant to submit complete applications, which will allow us to be in the best position to help us reach their goal of licensure. Like you, I know we want to make sure both active military and military spouses get priority and as easy a path as possible to being properly licensed. Our policy already places all of them at the front of the line to be processed. This new system will allow for better tracking to assure that we'll be able to process as quickly as possible. We're also aware of the nursing shortage, so we put more resources on our nursing board, what we call Healthcare 3, to move as many nurses into the field as possible. And by more resources, I mean more personnel. This remains a priority for our office. This all said, I still believe we need to modernize and streamline our licensing rules and laws and further fundamentally review who actually requires a license. I've always believed that we need to work together to make it as easy as possible for Georgians to pursue the career they want. That is how we stay the #1 state in order to do business. The next division I'd like to review is Securities and Charities. I'm grateful for the governor's budget proposal that has incorporated the realignment of resources that we requested. Our office wanted to make sure that the Cemeteries Board had the support they needed to protect Georgians. To assure we met that goal, I directed that the Cemeteries Board be moved to the more financially focused Securities Division and our great division director, Ms. Nula Zaharis. They have the staff knowledge to properly examine the financial reporting of cemeteries. Cemetery owners have an important trust with people's money that prepay for both burials and upkeep, and we can't allow scammers to take advantage of Georgians. We have seen this move already produce results, so aligning the staff positions and their support resources under securities is a positive development. We also work with Securities and Change Commission on investigations that have led to prosecutions, working sometimes in conjunction with our Attorney General. Securities and Charities is another lean organization that is proposed to spend only $1,135,781 for fiscal 2023, and it will bring in approximately $15 million in fees for the state. So that brings us to the final chapter, and that is elections. You may be aware that there's been some discussion around the division and this topic over the past few years. I want to let all of you know that our priority remains running secure elections that all Georgians can understand, that they were fair, secure, and accurate. This environment has not made that an easy task, but none of us ran for office to do easy things. We ran to do the right thing for Georgians. Since 2016 in Georgia, we've had people making claims about our elections from all sides. I will continue to do what I see as the right thing to secure our elections. I have directed the reorganization to account for the new system, security, and training necessary to keep our overall voting system secure and prepared for any eventualities. This means making our election liaisons focused on both support of the counties in their role of running elections and training to help them help themselves. We have some specific enhancements that we are looking to continue or add with what we have learned from the 2020 election. These include focused cybersecurity IT employees dedicated to security for both the voter registration system, the election management systems, and voting systems, including the equipment. We will continue ballot tracking of absentee ballots to allow voters to track their ballots through the voting process. We are going to enhance inventory controls on both ballot security paper and equipment, including barcode technology, and randomized hash auditing of scanners and BMDs in the counties by a third-party lab, and also building out technology for chain of custody on all ballots to allow for greater transparency of the process. We will also increase post-election audits and add additional laser scanners to allow for thorough verification of security paper for both the state and the counties. Security, both physical security of our elections and cybersecurity, is, I know we have heard about this, but it's true, a race with no finish line. We will continue to invest in keeping our overall system secure and still easily accessible for all Georgia voters. I also stand committed to see the Election Integrity Act, SB 202, fully implemented. We have implemented much of the law and are working to get it all done for the 2022 cycle. I am grateful to have had our office to be so involved in the drafting of most of the law, and this has been so mischaracterized for political purposes. This is a good, solid improvement in election administration in most of the law. We launched a new voting system in the middle of a pandemic, and we, working to support the counties, had a general election with record registrations, record turnout, with all three methods of voting still available for our voters: early voting, no excuse absentee by mail, and election day voting, done safely and available for every Georgia registered voter. Further, we had average wait times of 3 minutes on the afternoon of November election day. From an election administration point of view, we hope to see the same success in 2022. With your support, we will. Finally, we come to investigations. I will never skip this opportunity to let you, the budget writers, know we need more investigators and more resources for them. I know we focus on elections investigations, which coming out of 2018 were at a record level, and then a record level of investigations coming out of 2020. My office, working with the State Election Board, have done a record number of referrals to the Attorney General's office for violation of election law and State Election Board rules. That said, our investigators have other responsibilities, as well as in support of items like investigating reports to the Professional Licensing Board. This division also covers inspections of facilities for safety and to help stop potential criminal activity not related to investigations. Despite the increased volume of investigations from fiscal 19 to fiscal 21, we have lowered the average number of days for an investigation from 103 days to 111. We also did a record number of inspections in fiscal 21 of 12,222. But with the increased number of facilities, number of businesses, and increasing number of complaints driven by population alone, we need more investigators and inspectors to properly meet the demand. I do want to let you know I'm very grateful for the appropriation of 23 vehicles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We needed those for our investigators to replace those that have already reached the end of their useful life. We had cars out there that had well over 150,000 miles, and we were spending lots of money on repairs just to keep them going. Our hardworking, post-certified officers need these vehicles in running condition. So again, I am grateful that you have included them in your proposal, and I hope you will look at them favorably. The elections investigations have taken a lot of bandwidth for our investigators. These 20 men and women cover investigations beyond that, but are also important. So as I said when I began with the investigations division, I would never want to miss an opportunity to ask for more post-certified investigators to help carry this large and growing workload. I anticipate 2022 will be another year of unexpected challenges and successes. I want to thank you for your work, for the people who represent I and my staff stand ready to help you and our shared constituents to meet the goals you want to. Also, Mr. Chairman, you asked Gabriel Sterling earlier, we will be spending over $3 million to send out the postcards once the district's lines are all set, and they'll be going out from the counties, and that's will be something that will hit our budget also. I stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your presentation. Are there any questions from members in the audience? Representative Dickey, Chairman Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for those comments. I know you spent a lot of time talking about professional licensing boards, and that's my question is, you said you had a lot of increased applications, and do you think that's temporary? I know some of our professional licensed personnel in the state are a little disappointed in the time it's taken to get some license renewed and things. Is that situation getting better, or what's the timeline for improving that service?
Well, first of all, I don't think quantity is going to go away. With population growth, we'll continue to see strong growth. Earlier, probably late spring, early summer, Gabriel Sterling, our Chief Operating Officer, spent several days a week down in the Macon office, and we've streamlined the process that they've been going through, and we've reduced the time to get responses back to people. But at the end of the day, it's an office that is challenged with manpower resources, and that's one of the challenges we have. It takes in about $10 million, takes in about $20 million, and it spends about $10 million. And if we had more resources for additional people, we could help reduce that. But we also will be looking at streamlining that with a new operating system that we believe will really help every license holder have a uniform process and reduce that further. And we understand, we hear from that. I'm a licensed civil engineer, structural engineer, and general contractor, but our nurses are the largest licensed professional, and I want to make sure I keep them happy too.
Thank you, Secretary. Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Secretary, you mentioned about the short wait times in this last election. What was the range of the wait times?
In the afternoon, when we were tracking that, at our location, in the afternoon when I tracked that, I screenshot actually when it was mostly 3 minutes, and at one period it actually went down to 2 minutes. The longest I saw on the leaderboard was 50 minutes. So actually everything was under 1 hour. With SB 202, you have actually required now counties to keep those lines shorter than 1 hour. I think that's a good thing. We all hate long lines. We hate them on Monday morning at Chick-fil-A, and we hate them when we show up to vote for elections. But the longest line I saw on my leaderboard, and I could pull out my old photos, and I can get a copy of that to you if you'd like, but I believe it was 50 minutes was the longest. So the counties really had done a great job compared to what we had in the middle of the pandemic in the June 2020 primary.
Do you remember where that 50 minutes was?
No, but I had the screenshot, so I'll pull it off my phone and send it to you.
Thank you.
It was Northwest Georgia. There, thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you for we'll follow up on that later. Do we have any questions online? No questions online. Any other questions in the audience? Mr. Secretary, thank you again for your presentation.
Thanks.
Hope you have a good afternoon. And next, we'll hear from the Chairman of the Public Service Commission, Commissioner Tricia Pridemore.
You can advance it. All right. There's just 3 slides. It's pretty easy. Good afternoon. Hello. Thank you, Chairman Tillery, Chairman England. Thank you to the members of the General Assembly for this opportunity to present on behalf of the Georgia Public Service Commission. I am proud to serve a 2-year term as its chairman. 2022 will be a very busy year at the PSC. In addition to our regularly scheduled commission-led hearings, which we meet 4 times a month, we will also have a Georgia Power Integrated Resource Plan, which sets a 20-year strategic plan for electricity generation and distribution, a Georgia Power rate case, an Atlanta gas light rate review, and 2 additional cases for Plant Vogtle Units 3 and 4. I would be remiss if I didn't note at this time that during the time of the pandemic, we never missed one of those regularly scheduled hearings. We have 2 committee hearings a month as well as 2 administrative hearings, and then we have administrative law judges that also do individual hearings for casework as well. But your commission was completely functional throughout the entire pandemic. Let's go to slide 1. Let's talk a little bit about the Plant Vogtle expansion. It is still underway, with Unit 3 expected to move into service later this year and Unit 4 in 2023. We have 2 construction monitoring cases before us this year as we prepare for the prudency hearings, which determine the final cost impacts. We're at the table with the federal government and every entity involved in bringing the first new nuclear construction project in the United States in 30 years to fruition. Once complete, this carbon-free baseload energy will continue to solidify Georgia as the #1 place for business and the #1 place for market-driven clean energy. Let's go to slide 2. Let's hope it looks better than the first one. There we go. Rural broadband expansion. The Georgia Public Service Commission has been at the forefront of Georgia's rural broadband expansion since the General Assembly passed SB 2 in 2019 and HB 244 in 2020. Because of this collaboration, 19 of the 41 electric membership co-ops now offer broadband to unserved and underserved areas in Georgia. Our staff continues through the cost allocation process, and our knowledge and understanding of federal support programs to states continues to grow. So far, 6,974 miles of fiber has been designed, affecting over 900,000 meters, including 95,000 electric poles, with 1,391 miles of infrastructure make-ready already complete. Much of this work has been done in cooperation with partnerships with local rural telephone companies, of which our state has 31, as well as with the cable providers. This is an area that we see Georgia to continue to grow in, not just in 2022, but also into the future. Go to slide 3 for me. The third and final slide I have for you today is on electric vehicles. In 2019, the PSC began the EV Make-Ready expansion in that integrated resource plan. This allowed for transmission hardening and reinforcement, plus the elimination of charging deserts across the state. With the rapid adoption of EVs, the PSC turns our attention now to reliable and durable power to those charging stations pretty much anywhere in Georgia. The need for voltage increases will be a major topic in this integrated resource plan. And additionally, the General Assembly can choose to expand the footprint of where charging stations can be located. And for that transmission reinforcement, that's where the PSC comes in. And we are looking to be able to get as many Georgians plugged into an EV that sees fit to. In fiscal year 2021, the PSC returned $1,032,796 to the state treasury in collected fees and fines. That is more than double the FY 2020 returns of $521,305. We recently fully implemented the PeopleSoft financial system and are now using the same technology for agency management as other state agencies. As the PSC has explained in prior budget presentations, we have significantly fewer employees than in the past. We're down from 108 at the pre-recession peak. We currently have 72 full-time employees doing the work that's constitutionally required and any special projects as provided by the General Assembly. Myself and the other 4 PSC commissioners are grateful to Governor Kemp for raises that his budget provides for PSC staff and for the funding of legal representation and electronic document management. Today, we ask the Joint Committee to consider appropriating an additional $962,886 to restore 9 of the lost positions, namely in the areas of engineering and financial analysis, putting us at 81 of the 108 positions. Lastly, I'd like to thank Chairmans England and Chairman Tillery for the outreach regarding the Integrated Resource Plan and its potential impact on local school systems. If power generation plants are decommissioned, we recognize that there is an impact in QBE, and the Commission and myself stand ready to assist. I also look forward to sitting down with Chairman England to discuss home power needs for effective EV charging. With that, I am available to the committee for questions.
Thank you, Chairman Pridemore. We have a couple of questions. I think the first one is Representative Mary Margaret Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, hi, Representative Oliver.
Last week, the federal EPA advised the state that its change in coal ash pond decommissioning was changing significantly. Does that require you to ask Georgia Power for new plans on their coal ash pond decommissioning, or procedurally tell me how you're going to implement these new rules?
Very good question, Representative Oliver. So coal combustion residual asset recovery obligations, that's CCR-ARO, and we do that within the rate case proceeding. Thankfully, this EPA advisement came in before the company has filed their 2022 rate case. We do expect that to be updated. There are 19 coal ash active sites across the state, and we believe that the EPA's changes affect about 6 of them. It is a little premature until we get the NOPR that goes along with it to where we truly understand what the impact could be. Once we receive that back, I expect that the company then would then file their 2022 rate case with those changes reflected.
May I ask one follow-up? You have issued some rulings on approval of the plans for Georgia Power. Have any of those approved plans now been contradicted by the EPA action last week?
We issue approval of the recovery of the cost of those plans, but we only do that once the EPA and EPD has issued approval. So we're not environmental regulators, we're financial and market regulators, so we wait until we get the advisement from the environmental recovery agencies first.
Okay, we got one online question from Chairman Don Parsons. He's asking to please describe what the PSC has done specifically to better enable the EMCs, electric membership cooperatives, to provide broadband to rural Georgia.
Thank you, Chairman Parsons. So as part of SB 2 that was passed by this General Assembly in 2019, it allowed the EMCs to enter into the broadband business, but with that came a cost allocation process. That is to ensure that an electric ratepayer in the state of Georgia is not financing broadband delivery and technology to within that coverage footprint. So our telecommunications staff works through the CAM process, as we call it, to be able to oversee the finances of the EMC, make sure there's no cost allocation, trip-ups there, make sure that what's being done in particular by the EMC, that they're covering that through their own financial means and not through the work of their electric ratepayers. Most of the time, what we're finding within these 19 EMCs is they're doing this work through a partnership. And it's facilitating those partnerships that the PSC has been such an active part of, whether it be with rural telephone providers, whether it be with cable. We're excited to see Governor Kemp and the grants that we're expecting to be able to continue this rural broadband work, but it's really been through the establishment of partnerships and shared resources.
Chairman Hostetler.
Thank you. Good to see you, Commissioner. And I think you said there were going to be 3 electricity rate increases this year, 2 related to Plant Vogel, if I understood right. The question I've got, I know the Vogel was supposed to be on in 2017, which I believe may have been even before you were appointed, but obviously where we are right now. So the consumers right now are going to have some pretty big cost overruns to pay for, but because of the structure of the upcharge, profit upcharge on all the cost overruns, the profit of Georgia Power is going to go from a little over $7 billion to over at least $12 billion. Do you think the consumers should pay just for the cost overruns, or should they pay the cost overruns and an additional $5+ billion in profit?
I can only speak to the Plant Vogel cases and the testimony that's been presented to the Commission so far. We are currently under an ex parte for VCM 25. And that was through any budgeted items that had already been presented and before the Commission back to VCM 17. So I'll speak to what I believe to be what's presented to this date without violating ex parte on the case. So Plant Vogel and Plant Bowen are really two separate issues, and I want to be very clear. I didn't say that there's going to be 3 rate increases this year. I said we've got 1 rate case, 2 VCMs, and then an AGL rate case as well. So those are kind of apples and oranges. One's more strategic planning, one is rate recovery of what's already been approved. In the case of Plant Bowen, I do expect that we'll see a filing by the company to look very closely at units 1 and 2 at Bowen, which are aged cool units with also aged scrubber technology on them, which is very difficult for the state to get approved new scrubber technology from the EPA at the federal level. On Vogel's side, though, I think that what we're going to see there is we're going to see the company come back in prudency with what they believe the ratepayer should cover over the cost of the project over what's already been budgeted. They have already met the max budget obligation that the commission's already approved.
So you're saying that you can't give your opinion on whether you think an additional $5 profit is warranted or not. Is that what you're saying?
I would not. Not without testimony. No, sir.
Chairman Ben Watson.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate that. Thank you for what you're doing. Can you just sort of help from an educational standpoint, give an overview of the electric vehicle charging stations, public charging stations, private charging stations? I know there's some where they're popping up along, where I drive on I-16 at some of the service stations. Just sort of a little quick overview in the future, so how they go hand in hand with what's coming online, whether it's Rivian or the Lightning, that kind of thing.
Great question, Chairman Watson. So EVs are a very excited growth area for the state of Georgia. But where we really specialize at the Commission is in recovery of the cost of transmission and distribution, as well as what's needed to increase voltage capabilities at a residential house. So if we want to be able to go home and charge our Tesla, what is it going to take to be able to improve the electrical prowess of our homes so that we can have a Tesla charging station, some type of fast charger there? Also, we've worked, in addition to Make Ready, which is what we call that transmission distribution work, we also have done a lot within deserts. Recently, we solved a desert that was going on in Lee County, basically getting people from Valdosta to Albany. So there's areas of the state and pockets of the state where we don't want to see somebody get out with their EV and just basically get stranded. And so the amount of recovery work that we're telling Georgia Power that they can recover through customers is primarily to solve those deserts, but also in the transmission Make Ready. There is some upgrade work that has to take place as we continue to look for more and more ways to electrify parts of our lives, whether that be with smart home technology or with electric vehicles. And to be able to do that, we're going to have to not only increase our transmission and distribution system, but also continue to work on ways to keeping it secure.
Chairman Sam Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you for being here. It sounds like you've got a lot going on, and you mentioned that 2022 would be a busy year for you as well. And I was just curious, you are the Public Service Commission, and I was just curious how the public were attending your meetings and how you were doing from a space standpoint. And is the public allowed to come into your meetings, and are you able to accommodate this workload in your current space, and just things from that aspect?
Thank you, Chairman Watson. We're tight. I'll be really blunt. We're tight. We have, because of the pandemic, we have sort of changed out the public accessibility framework for our hearings. We had a public forum that was a wide-scale public forum that was slated for the 19th of this month that we've had to push back because of this recent uptick in COVID. But we have a small hearing room on the first floor of 244 Washington Street. We have everything about our agency is completely publicly accessible. And so it would be great for us to be able to expand a little bit, especially now since COVID, we can't do our large-scale public forums like we used to because we just simply don't have the room to hold people.
We have several more questions, but we're starting to run low on time. We're going to take one more. One of the other earlier people to light up their button, Senator Lucas.
Yes. What is happening with the rate increase at Vogel when the law allows Georgia Power a profit? And where is the taxpayer or the ratepayer involved with it? Because it's almost like we're going back to CWIP, construction work in progress, when they were trying to get the ratepayers to actually pay for all of the construction. And I understand that during the period, Georgia Power had some folks that bankrupt on her, or they fired them because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Yes. And so there was an increase in the construction costs. But where's the ratepayer in between the Public Service Commission and Georgia Power as far as the rate they're going to pay on the overcosts or the overruns at plant?
That's a very good question, Senator Lucas, and dovetails with Senator Hofstetler's. So in a nutshell, the PSC has already awarded the recovery of all of the budget that has been outlined for Georgia Power up to this point on Plant Vogtle Units 3 and 4. In addition to that, CWIP, Construction Work in Progress, or the NCCR tariff, is still in effect. That was passed by this General Assembly several years ago. And what we've done, though, is as the project has continued to age, we have at the Commission been able to lower the amount that's collected on a monthly basis through CWIP. So at this point, the company has exhausted the recovery that was awarded to them in VCM 17, and they have not sought any additional recovery from this Commission. Contrary to what the newspaper likes to report, they have not sought any additional recovery from this Commission, and CWIP has continued to go down, so that what started out as about $10 a month per average residential ratepayer is now down around $3 a month. And I believe the last action that we took on that was in October of last year, where we reduced it yet another $1. So we're about $3 a month now. CWIP, as you are likely to remember, it covers the cost of financing, so that the financing costs then aren't financed on the back end of the project. I don't know what the company is going to come in to seek to recover in prudency or in any subsequent VCMs. It'll be interesting to see what they deem to be appropriate to come back to us with, but at this point, they have not yet.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, there's several other questions. I'm sure you'll make yourself available to answer.
Most certainly. They're welcome to call me, email me. Happy to field any question at any time.
Okay. Thank you again for your presentation, and I'll let the members catch you if they want to as you walk to the back, if they want to grab you now and ask those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. Have a great week.
Thank you. Our next presentation comes from Commissioner Christopher Nunn of the Department of Community Affairs. And he's going to be present virtually, I believe.
That's right. Chairman, can you hear me?
We got you. Yes, sir.
Great. Well, good afternoon. Chairman England, Chairman Tillery, members of the committee and staff, certainly appreciate the opportunity to present today, and I regret I'm unable to be with you in person. On behalf of the entire team at DCA, thank you for your support of our extremely broad mission and diverse responsibilities. I know your agenda's packed, but I want to just briefly touch on a few of these before we get into the budget. DCA, of course, is the state's community development agency, primarily a finance agency. We have statutory responsibility for comprehensive planning, as well as providing technical assistance for downtown development and historic preservation, administering programs such as the job tax credits, rural zones, broadband mapping, small business lending, and many, many more. A year ago, you moved the Historic Preservation Division to DCA. I'm pleased to report that move has gone well. We continue to uncover additional details, but I can assure you that this has been a really good fit. We're also entering the 5th year of the Rural Zone program. I visited with several existing rural zone communities that have made great strides based on this initiative, which was championed by the House Rural Development Council. Now, DCA also administers the One Georgia Authority, which I will speak to momentarily as I review our recommendations. We administer numerous other federally funded grant programs, such as the CDBG program, the Appalachian Regional Commission. And over the past several years, our team has made continuous enhancements to the annual CDBG process, which is, of course, competitive, in addition to effectively managing disaster recovery funds and CARES funding made available through HUD's CDBG program. And we, of course, also serve as the state's housing agency, which means we're responsible for administering federal funds for homelessness assistance, the Housing Choice Voucher or Section 8 program, as well as several other HUD-funded programs. DCA administers housing tax credits, which are the primary tool to build and maintain affordable workforce and senior housing. And through the Georgia Housing Finance Authority, DCA administers a first-time homebuyer program through the Bond Finance Georgia Dream program. Now, that's a lot, and honestly doesn't do complete justice to DCA's work efforts and statewide impact. But needless to say, I'm extremely proud of our team. They do an exceptional job, even under increasingly challenging circumstances. So today, I thought I would highlight a couple of items from our amended FY 22 and our FY 23 budget recommendations. And of course, leave time for questions at the end. Let me start with the enterprise changes related to compensation for state employees. I appreciate the recognition that workforce challenges affect us all. Just like you, I've lost count of the occasions where workforce has come up as an issue for private and public sector leaders alike. And in each section of our amended FY 22 budget, you'll find an adjustment for a well-deserved $5,000 pay increase for all of the benefits eligible full-time state employees. In our FY 23 recommendations, there are 5 corresponding items to provide a cost of living adjustment for full-time employees, the ability for those employees to withdraw up to 40 hours a year of earned annual leave, and then related ERS, DOAS, and TeamWorks adjustments. And we're working closely with OPB to understand all of the details. But for your information, these recommendations total $569,470 in the AFY 22 budget and $790,086 in the FY 23 cost of living adjustments throughout the DCA budget. Again, we're working with OPB, and I apologize, I don't have the detail upon which these recommendations are based, but you can see in the program budget financial summary that DCA relies on a variety of fund sources, with state appropriations representing only a portion of our overall funding. Now, of course, all of our full-time employees are benefits eligible state employees. And as of December 31st, DCA has 510 budgeted positions. 62 of these are involved in state-funded community development programs. 44 are responsible for federal community development programs for which the state must provide some administrative matching funds. 231 are involved in housing, including bond finance, tax credits, mortgage servicing, and federal grants administration. 105 are responsible for the Housing Choice Voucher program. And there are 68 positions that are involved in the overall administration of a finance agency. So accounting, budget, IT, HR, marketing, communications, internal audit. In addition to these numbers that I've just shared, there are approximately 150 temporary employees working in various programs and functional capabilities, primarily stimulus-funded rental assistance and mortgage assistance. We had an additional 50 new employees join today to support these very programs. And I mention these temporary employees not because they factor into the budgeted increases at hand, but the numbers are a material part of our workforce and do put stress on our administrative infrastructure, particularly HR, accounting, and IT. Now, I'm mindful of time, so let me move on to other specific budget recommendations. Turning first to the amended FY 22 budget. Under state economic development programs, you'll find a $112 million adjustment, $112,627,419 to be precise, to assist Jasper, Morgan, Newton, and Walton counties, that JDA, with the development of the Rivian project site, which promises to be a significant boon for the entire region and the state. I understand that Commissioner Wilson spoke to you earlier today about this, and as he indicated, these funds are intended to assist the community with land acquisition, site preparation, and construction of a rail spur onto this site. Now, moving on in the amended, under the One Georgia Authority budget, there's an adjustment of $1,716,400 for a water storage agreement with the Corps of Engineers at Lake Allatoona. This is actually very similar to an item in our amended FY19 budget for water storage at Lake Lanier. And it represents a vital regional commitment that EPD has negotiated with the Corps of Engineers. It totals 32,000 acre feet of water storage. That's about 10.5 billion gallons, or roughly 6% of the entire lake's storage capacity. And One Georgia is simply serving as a conduit to assist EPD with this transaction. I expect that Rick Dunn can offer more detailed insights in his presentation later this afternoon. But if you think about the entire lake as a storage facility, imagine that the state is prepaying the owner for 6% of that storage unit space for the next 25 to 30 years. And the purpose is to ensure that there is enough water available, particularly in Bartow and Cobb and that region, for future withdrawals to meet growth needs. Now, while I'm speaking about One Georgia, I'd like to update you on two items from our FY22 budget, if that's okay. Last year, you included funding for two new One Georgia programs, Broadband and Rural Innovation. I'll start first with Broadband. Immediately following last year's session, we were prepared to launch a round of broadband grant funding that was scheduled to be announced on June 1st. As the guidelines for the American Rescue Plan funding came down from Washington, it was quickly apparent that broadband would be an eligible use for state fiscal recovery funds. And understanding that the state was about to roll out a much larger funding program on a similar timeline, we elected to delay the One Georgia program through the first round of ARP funding. I know, some of you participated with me on the governor's Broadband Grant Review Committee for those funds, and we are currently reviewing the first round applications, the forthcoming grants, and identifying the gaps to ensure that the One Georgia broadband funds are best used to meet unmet needs. The federal funding requirements are somewhat steep, particularly to our most rural areas, and we are committed to putting those One Georgia funds to use in a most responsible manner. As for the Rural Innovation funds, the launch of this program was slightly delayed, quite honestly, because of the incredible volume of activity with stimulus funded programs. We completed the program rules rollout in October, and we had 10 applications for the first round of grants in November. Those applications totaled more than 15 million in requests, though, as might be expected for a first round with a relatively short turnaround time, only 2 of those projects were funded out of the gate to the tune of $1.1 million. Now, several others were really good applications that simply needed additional work to better develop the concept. So I would anticipate that those come back as more mature, fully thought out applications in a future round. For the next round, so the second round of funding on a quarterly cycle, we have already received 10 applications, which total more than 20 million in requests. So I would say that while we were a little bit delayed out of the gate with this program, we're already beginning to get some good traction, and I just wanted to give you an update on those 2 important adds. With respect to our FY23 recommendations, Mr. Chairman, there really are no other additions beyond the enterprise adjustments that I've already discussed. So if you'd like, I'm happy to pause and take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Chairman England. Do you have any questions about the on the line? None online. We got one in the audience. Representative, or Senator, sorry, Lucas.
Commissioner, first of all, I want to thank you for helping Elbert County Hospital with that Appalachian grant that created, making sure that they were not a failure and closing. That's number one. The other thing is, I represent Hancock County, which was, with COVID, #1 in the nation. Per death, per population, #1 in the nation. Has that county commission come to you and ask you for a One Georgia or a grant to help them redo the closed hospital and put a clinic there that would be able to take care of its citizens?
Senator Lucas, I certainly appreciate the questions and thank you for the help on the ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission grant. That was that took a little bit of work to get that through Washington, but that was a very good program, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to highlight that. You know that I spend a fair amount of time in Hancock County and Washington County and those parts of your district. To my knowledge, and I will have to check with our team, we certainly spend a lot of time with the folks in Sparta and Hancock County. I am not aware of any specific request related to an urgent care facility or the like. That I am not aware does not mean that that is not in discussions with my team, but not to my knowledge.
My problem is, I know they need it. The problem is, I'm not a county commission, so therefore I can't apply for a One Georgia grant even for them. They would have to do it through the county, and that's the reason I was asking, because now that the resurgence of COVID, Hancock County is in the same exact position it was when the pandemic started. And what I'm trying to do is to get health care in rural Georgia where it's needed.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Representative Dempsey.
Thank you. Commissioner, you are doing so many good things. The whole department is doing so many good things. I cannot drive to the Capitol every day, though, without seeing something that's very heavy on my heart, and I know you're aware of it, and you're concerned about it, too. We have a huge, growing concern of growth in a homeless, street camping population. Today, on the other side of the Capitol, there is an increasing, growing number of tents right there on Central Avenue. You can go on any ramp off of our interstate system, and in communities of all sizes, you find along I-75 up in northwest Georgia, people who are standing there and have come from the woods and are asking for money. At night, when I go to the condominium where I stay during session, they're on William Street, I have watched so many people come very close to being killed, hit by cars as they wander through them, as they react, sometimes in very violent ways, asking for money. We have a huge problem in our state, and there is today the State Housing Trust Fund for the Homeless Commission. It's important. The work they're doing is very important, but the reality is, as we look around, you cannot help but see it's not addressing the total picture. Not everyone who is homeless has a mental health problem, and not every person who has a mental health problem is homeless. Not everyone is a criminal who's homeless, and not every homeless person is dealing with criminals all around them, but it does exist. There were two very, very severe cases, one in California and one in New York this weekend, that came from homeless people. We can continue to act like it's not here on our doorstep, but you can't drive by Central Avenue and not realize that there are people that shouldn't be in that situation. So I just want to ask you to keep it on your mind and to keep helping me, particularly this year, as we try to find another way, not take away from what's being done. Permanent supportive housing is the goal. I'm behind it 100%. But we need to all work together and try to find a way to not put our cities, our citizens, and Georgia in places that are in the mildest world uncomfortable, but really could become dangerous.
Representative Dempsey, I couldn't agree with you more. And provided the funding, I look forward to working with on the solutions.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Commissioner, we've got one question from online, and it's from Senator Nan Orrock. She says, thank you for the presentation today, but what is the status of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program in Georgia, as we've only distributed about 10% of the dollars so far? With constituents facing eviction who applied and do not have a response from DCA yet, who can she contact or refer them to for urgent action before they get evicted? And how can the General Assembly ourselves help on speeding up the delivery of funds to vulnerable families facing homelessness?
Well, excellent. Well, thank you, Chairman England, and thank you, Senator Orrock. I assure you the topic of emergency rental assistance will consume more time than I have remaining. And I, like most of the work that is done by dedicated, hardworking agency professionals, it can't be broken down into sound bites. This is an appropriations hearing, so let me start with the fiscal details. This is a federal program. In December of 2020, Congress appropriated $25 billion for emergency rental assistance. That is important because the CARES Act had few specific housing provisions. However, it also occurred with no data and very little input from affordable housing professionals who administer such funds. So this is a new program. It did not exist before December 27th of 2020. 1 year ago, there was no guidance yet on this program. Treasury released that initial guidance to 482 grantees on January 19th of 2021. That guidance has been constantly evolving. So since no actual data exists to support the $25 billion appropriation, allocations were based primarily on population. Georgia was allocated a total of $710 million, which was distributed formulaically among 13 recipients as designated by Treasury. By formula, 12 local programs in Georgia received between $6 and $28 million. The remaining $552 million was allocated to the state of Georgia. That means that Georgia received nearly 4,200% of the average of other programs in the state. So if you're having trouble with that percentage, then I'm going to stop talking about this program in terms of percent of spend on incomparable sums of money. Since March 8th of 2021, which is the day that at least 2 Georgia programs launched, the states and Fulton counties, the 13 programs in our state have collectively distributed more than $200 million in assistance throughout 152 counties. That includes more than $75 million dispersed through the Georgia Rental Assistance Program. And in fact, contrary to the popular narrative, the state has dispersed more funds than any other single program in our state. Now, the 13 programs have operated collaboratively since day one, and you have to appreciate the collective impact that we have had for the 33,000 Georgia families that have already received assistance. And for the record, that's more than all but 17 states, each of which has experienced significantly more demand due in large part to the fact that their unemployment rates have been significantly higher than ours, 2 to 4% since the pandemic started. Now, that sort of relative comparison to other states is about as relevant as the percent of spend. So I'll focus on what we are doing, because I suspect the rental assistance question doesn't stem from an appreciation about what has been done, but rather a concern about what's yet to be done. So let's talk about processing, because that was really the root of the question. And that has been a challenge since we expanded from the 148 counties that the state initially served by design to all 159 counties. We have a team of more than 120 people who are processing applications 6 days a week. Many volunteered to work yesterday, a day on, not a day off, and we onboarded another 50 processors today. And yes, you might guess it, this is a constant churn due to the workforce challenges that we've already discussed, due to COVID illnesses, and quite honestly, due to the hostility that's been fomented around this program. I take every advantage of an opportunity to process funds as quickly as possible. And recently, Treasury unveiled a process for reallocating funds among existing grantees that had established programs. Not only was this not an option before October, it was not allowed. We asked. So if we have an existing local program and an efficient distribution system in place that is able to take on additional funds, I'm not thinking twice about enabling them. We have already reallocated to 5 local jurisdictions more than $80 million, which is the exact amount that those jurisdictions indicated would fully satisfy their needs. Again, we've collaboratively worked with all of these programs since day one to serve all of Georgia. You know, if I had my druthers, applicants would be able to submit a simple request online, payments would be instantaneously transmitted, your constituents would be beating down your doors to thank you, and on the occasion that you needed something from my team, they would be standing there by waiting for your call. I really honestly wish that were reality. But if for no other reason than the fact that these are at least 3-party transactions, it's more complicated and requires a little time. You know, many applicants, some because they've been misled by advocates, are applying for assistance at the point when rent is due. And I see that in the numbers every month. And I understand their frustration over a lack of immediate turnaround. We didn't create the program. We're executing it on Treasury's behalf. And while that situation is unfortunate, it's akin to filing a tax return for a refund, on the same day that you need money to pay your bills. Now that is why we have engaged with the magistrate courts to attempt to prioritize and identify those who may be at the tip of the spear with an eviction filing. Our team is working with the courts to avert those evictions where ERA is an option. Honestly, this approach differs from community to community because we've got 159 different court systems. Georgia Legal Services is an important statewide partner. We seem to have very successful court partnerships in Macon Bibb and Athens, Rockdale County, soon to come online in Cobb County. And I know that many of you have reached out with constituent status inquiries. I hope you can appreciate that every available resource is currently processing applications. If your individual inquiry were unique, a quick response would be simple, or if Seth and I had the ability to query the status of each application, which we do not, I'd spend my day on the phone with each of you. We receive dozens of daily inquiries, which honestly our HUD consultants who have been engaged by Treasury tell us is fewer than the norm in other states. But we receive those from individual applicants, from landlords, tenants, from you legislators, from others who are attempting to intercede on individuals' behalfs. I would have to repurpose a half a dozen staff simply to respond to those status inquiries. And right now we're focused on processing applications. We've already discussed the workforce challenge. I'd ask for you to give me some grace. This GRA team is comprised of some of the most dedicated public servants that I have known, and they are working hard to manage the workload. Since I made the proper decision to extend our program into Metro Atlanta last August, frankly, if the option for voluntarily shifting funds had existed at that time, I may have made a different decision. But we are working in an extremely dynamic program. I am confident that we are headed in the right direction. I realize that I just gave you a really long answer, and I'm happy, Senator, if you want to give me a call to talk offline.
Thank you, Commissioner, and we have reached the end of your time and also reached the end of the questions in the room and online, so thank you so much for your presentation today.
Thank you all.
Our next presenter will be Commissioner Russell McMurray with the Georgia Department of Transportation. And Commissioner, I believe you also have, we can see online, it looks like you have Janine Miller there with you, or she's online as well, so if you wish to for her to present anything or she wishes to add anything, we certainly leave that up to your discretion.
Thank you, Chairman Tillery. Got the presentation up. Thank you. Chairman England, Chairman Tillery, it's great to be with you and the members of the Joint Appropriations Committee today. In the room, we have Angela Whitworth, our treasurer, George Christensen, our budget officer, and Josh Waller, Director of Policy and Government Affairs. And as you noted, Janine Miller is online. Listen, we're glad to be with you on a sunny day. It says it's 52 degrees outside. So let me start by giving a big thank you to the men and women of GDOT that started on Friday and worked 24/7 through yesterday to make sure you could get to the Capitol okay for this important week. And big hats off to our partners over at the Department of Public Safety and GEMA for a good statewide response. It's my intention today is to share with you three things. One, I want to highlight part of the federal infrastructure bill because there's a lot of questions and some confusion around what that really means, and I'll boil it down to what it means for Georgia. I want to highlight some of the market trends we're seeing, including that of workforce, and then, of course, walk through our budget proposals. So let me start with the federal infrastructure bill on the next slide. The federal infrastructure bill is affectionately been called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. I will probably call it IIJA. It's also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL, also known as bill. So a lot of moving names going around, but I think what I wanted to show you of this slide was that it was a $1.2 trillion bill that was divided into what we would call traditional transportation programs and then non-transportation programs over 5 years. And so you can sort of see the break. The majority of it went to non-transportation type of infrastructure, all of which is very important, of course. Next slide, please. When I think about the IIJA or the infrastructure bill, I like to break it down into these four big old buckets. The first one is the existing formula programs, which are apportioned to each state based on factors like population and miles. And we saw that, and I'll go into detail on that on the next slide, on the next slides. The next bucket is the new formula buckets, which were the new programs, formula programs added to the transportation reauthorization. And then the third bucket there is discretionary. In fact, there was about $83 billion for transportation purposes in 39 discretionary programs in the IIJA. So a big part of this is discretionary that you have to compete for. And the last bucket, the orange bucket there, is policy and programs. A couple of those policies was codifying the one federal decision environmental streamlining process, which is certainly a good deal. It provides a shot clock on the federal resource agencies to approve environmental permits and the like. Another sort of big policy program, pilot program, was one of reconnecting communities at $1 billion over 5 years. And then one other one I just highlight is a national mileage-based user fee pilot program to look at how to generate transportation or to generate revenue for transportation going forward as there's more and more EVs, electric vehicles out on the roadways with declining motor fuel tax collection. So from a national perspective. So those are the sort of the four buckets I like to think about globally when we talk about this IIJA or the BIL. So on the next slide, we'll look at what it really means for Georgia. And we'll start with the surface transportation. So think highways, bridges, things like that. In this table list, basically what those revenue numbers or appropriations should look like. one of the biggest misconceptions I think people have is that this IIJA or the bipartisan infrastructure law was all additional money. It's not. In fact, what it does is it replaces the FAST Act, the previous 5-year transportation bill, with a new transportation bill with the plus ups, which is, as you can see in the first year, is about a 21% increase to Georgia over what we previously were appropriated under the FAST Act. And then each year there's an increase of 2% out to federal fiscal year 26. So what does that mean for Georgia? It means about a $300 million increase in federal dollars that would be available for surface transportation. And I always remind everybody that the federal dollars are subject to match, 80-20 match, and it's always good to leverage 80% on 20%, so that's a good leverage. But it does require more match to get access to these federal dollars. The other thing I like to remind you of is the federal program is reimbursable, meaning that we spend Georgia dollars first and seek reimbursement from Federal Highway Administration on a very timely basis. And I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to it in a couple of slides because that's an important detail to understand. Next slide, please. Now we're going to look at these buckets. The first bucket that was on the left was what was the formula programs or the plus ups. And from this table, you can see sort of what the increases were in the different sub buckets, if you will, or programs. And they really vary, from a wide range of from 23.8% to no increase. And actually the National Highway Program actually had a small decrease in total funding to Georgia. And so it's a little bit of a mixed bag as you look in each of these buckets of what really happened. Down in the yellow tables are the new buckets. That was that second bucket to the right that was yellow. So there's some new programs, one being a carbon reduction program, which is dealing with reduction of greenhouse gases. These would be dollars to keep traffic moving more efficiency or encourage not to be in traffic, those kind of projects. The Protect formula is dealing with resiliency programs. That would be projects like hurricane evacuation routes, hardening our infrastructure along the coast or other climate areas, slides in the mountains, things like that. So sort of hardening and reinforcing or rebuilding infrastructure that is subject to environmental stresses. The next program in the bottom box there is a bridge, a national bridge program at $45 million a year for poor and fair bridges for rehabilitation and replacement of those. And this is a very good program to get at those bridges. Is a big focus on also that these dollars go toward off-system or local bridges, of which Georgia's done a good job investing in already. And I just highlight that because Georgia and you and the General Assembly have been very favorable for bridge bonds in the past and appropriations of HB 170 dollars back from 2015, Georgia received the lowest federal funding level for this category of all the states. Now, I'd much rather have bridges in good condition than get a lot of federal money to repair bridges in bad condition. But this $45 million a year is certainly important to continue to drive down Georgia's posted bridges and bridges that need to be replaced or rehabilitated. And so those are sort of the new buckets that are out there and the dollar amounts on an annual basis that we anticipate to see. On the next slide, please, we'll talk about transit, what it means to transit in Georgia. And this is a table of approximation of the Federal Transit Administration's formula apportionment in the annual program estimates. As you can see, a pretty big increase at about almost 28% over the FAST Act levels, and then again grows a little over 2% each year. In the transit category, there's 10 new competitive discretionary programs. So as you can see from this infrastructure bill, there is a lot of discretionary competitive programs in it. And these are the increases we tend to see in the IIJA. The urbanized area formula funds, think ATL, MARTA, Cobb, Gwinnett, the big transit providers around Metro Atlanta. but also an increase for the rural formula grants for all our local transit throughout the state. And then again, some other programs. So just a reminder that GDOT administers all the urban, the non-urban, small urban, and rural transit, and the ATL has responsibility for metropolitan area region. The next slide is one of aviation, federal aviation block grant and discretionary dollars. This is a little bit complicated. There was actually a 2018 Federal Aviation Reauthorization Act that goes to federal fiscal year 23. And then the IIJA actually put about $30.7 million on top of that. So this is a real boost for FAA funding to Georgia. We recognize that the state match component of that is up to about 4.4 million. And that would be about the same for the locals as well. Generally, FAA dollars are 90% federal, 5% state, 5% local on this block grant dollars. So you can see a pretty big boost there. And also a very nice new, again, a discretionary program for airport terminal program, which has traditionally been ineligible. So this will help with terminals and other facilities on the airport. That certainly is good. $5 billion over 5 years, so $1 billion a year is what that is about. And we'll have to stay tuned as those rules and guidelines get developed. And I should have said that before. All the discretionary programs, USDOT and each of the modal agencies will have to develop what the rules are, go out for public comment, then solicit projects, make selection, and then make award. So out of such a big program, there's a lot of work to be done up at USDOT and each of the modal agencies to gain access at these discretionary dollars. So on the next slide is really sort of what this all means to Georgia. And let me come back to what I said earlier about the appropriations, about being a reimbursable program. Currently, the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, has not been fully funded by Congress. In fact, as you know, Congress is working through a continuing resolution. And what that means for transportation is we're still working on last year's FAST Act appropriation levels. And that appropriation goes through February 18th. And so that means that none of the new programs or the new discretionary programs that we talk about have been funded or can be utilized at this point. So that's an important thing to understand. That means to date, we have the ability to gain access to only $464 million through February 18th. And I'll remind everybody that we bid over $100 million a month. So it doesn't take long to go through the federal appropriations on a pro rata share. And of course, we're going to be very strategic and careful that we don't overextend ourselves using state dollars to advance the federal program. The federal government allows each state to do an IOU, basically to pay it with their own dollars and get reimbursed at a later date. And so we have done that analysis. We feel like we are good through bidding projects in March, but April will be questionable depending on what happens in February, on February 18th in Congress. We will certainly keep the subcommittees and our Transportation Committee in the Senate and the House well informed about what transpires as we get into February 18th. I get asked often, what does this really mean to Georgia? It means over $10.5 billion over the next 5 years. And I put plus because the discretionary is out there too. And I'm always reminded with the John F. Kennedy quote about a rising tide lifts all boats, and that it does. We at Georgia DOT are trying to align our boats in the harbor such that we can take full advantage of this infrastructure bill when it gets appropriated. So let me move away from the federal infrastructure bill. You're now all experts and you can wow anybody at any time you please, and move to the next slide and talk about the realities we're facing in the market. I often get asked, well, what's going on in the construction world? Because you see the prices at Home Depot and How does that translate into transportation infrastructure funding? This is analysis over the last year across the entire state of price increases that we're seeing in the major items for transportation projects. So this is an up and down, okay? So percentages have gone up and they've come back down and they've gone back up. And this is something we watch. We are still getting competitive bidding, albeit, of course, higher based on these inflationary prices and things that we are seeing through the construction. So the bottom line is the dollar just doesn't go quite as far as it used to due to these kind of impacts, but it's the same in the construction industry as you see in the home building industry and, even at the grocery store. So these things are real, but we're working our way forward with those and recognize those as we look at and review. Again, competitive bidding is still good. Let me, before we get into the budget, let me move into this next slide. Is absolutely the most important thing I'm going to talk to you about today, and it's our employees. And as demonstrated over the past 4 days with winter weather and looking at a forecast for this weekend, we can't do any of these things or advance transportation in Georgia without exceptional employees. Our current head count is 3,637. The top chart shows you the steady decline of headcount we've had going back to 2007. And I might add that we've delivered over $1 billion more projects and programs. And now with IIJA, there's another 20 to 30% more coming on top of that federally. So we have a lot to do in front of us. And, and it's obviously a challenge that everybody faces. In last fiscal year, we had over 600 employees depart the department. That pie chart shows you that 60% of those were resignation, only a quarter retirement. And the rest of those things were people that either didn't come back to work and quit or got fired. So, the biggest part is resignation for sure and retirement. And then the other part I just highlight in the bottom left corner is the tenure of our workforce has changed dramatically since 2009. In 2009, only 18% of our workforce was 0 to 10 years experience. And now that is at 56%. And so that's a big impact on institutional knowledge. And so institutional knowledge, skills, and ability. And we're certainly focused on how do we continue to recruit and retain great employees that we have here at Georgia DOT. So through our budgets, both in Amended 22 and in 23, you'll see items, line items for recruitment, retention, and salary increases so that we can try to slow this downward trajectory and build back to about 4,000 employees. We need to be that strength to handle snow and ice events, hurricanes, tornadoes, all the things that happen in Georgia, plus just having the workforce deliver a bigger state and federal program. So I just wanted to share this data with you to give you the reality, and I'm sure every agency head has talked to you about the reality. So, and we're thankful for your kind consideration as it comes to those items that deal with recruitment, retention of employees for each agency and especially department. Let me move in now to the amended 22 budget on the next slide. This table gives you the summary of the 22 base and the changes recognized in the budget. The biggest change for us was an addition of $56 million in transportation fees. And then the rideshare fees were increased to $9.8 million to bring it to a total of $17.5 million. We had some general funds amended in. I'll talk about what that is in a moment. And then you see Greta, which is attached to your former to DCA, to Christopher Nunn. Those Greta is attached over there. So those dollars come out to fund Greta, leaving the amended 22 at $2.166 billion. The next slide I'd like to show is where those dollars generally used. And this is a great summary of collapsing some of our budget programs. The biggest column there is capital projects. That's 3 budget programs. That's capital construction, capital maintenance, and local roads administration, which constitute 46% of our state budget. Over in general operations is only about 11%. That's 5 budget categories. That's everything from planning, design, operating, and everything it takes to deliver projects. LMIG, of course, is at 10%. And then the next biggest category at 20% is our routine maintenance. Again, taking care of the existing infrastructure. So again, just a graphic nature to show you where the lion's share of the dollars go. And if you look at it, if you look at the capital programs, the routine maintenance, and the LMIG, that's a good 76% of our budget. In the next couple slides, let me get into actually the details of the budget. So this is a table of motor fuel. So this table is very specific to fund source. So this is motor fuel fund source. As you can see, in capital construction, we're redistributing $16 million out of capital construction motor fuel to be redistributed through our budget to deal with those things that we talked about, recruitment and retention and salaries for employees. And so this is how that looks. Every number below the 16 million is redistribution of those numbers. Now, don't worry too much about capital construction at this point. The next slide has fees going toward capital construction, as you can see, and that at 55.9 million in the second row there. So the total capital construction of motor fuel and fees now total $936 million. No change in bond debt. And let me talk just a moment about intermodal at $10.9 million change from the base. What constitutes that? About 53,000 are added for the $5,000 pay increase. $1 million has been added of general funds for a replacement of the ferry that DNR operates to Sapelo Island. That will be the match component for replacing that ferry, which is federally eligible. There's $4 million to support the ATL that comes from rideshare fees, and about 5.9 million of that are rideshare fees that will be going to rural transit improvements across the state. And then finally, the bottom there in payments to ATL is that $68,000 is to address the $5,000 pay increase as proposed. So that wraps up the amended 22. Let me go to the next slide. And we'll jump into the FY23 revenue comparison table. We've added amended 22 to the right side just as a way of comparison. And let me give you a little detail here. Motor fuel increase in excise $48.8 million to total slightly over $2.008 billion. Recognize another $20.97 million in transportation fees, bringing those to $150.97 million. You can see that rideshare fees also increased by 8.2 over the base. There was a reduction in state general funds. Those had to do with prior adjustments to the base, and I'll speak to those in a moment. Again, Greta comes out as it goes over to DCA, which leaves a FY23 budget total of $2.175 billion, which is about a 0.4% increase over the amended 22 to give you some basis of comparison. Now let me move to the next slide. And again, this is the table. I won't go through all these. I will tell you that the capital programs increased by 2% over amended 22. Routine maintenance increased by 1%, and GO bond debt actually decreased by 2%, making those things possible. So again, just where the dollars are going, which is always important for you as the legislature and General Assembly to know where these dollars are generally mostly being spent. And that's, of course, where we want them to be in the capital programs and maintenance and LMIG to our cities and counties, which does so many good things. All right, the next table on the next slide here is the detailed breakout, again, by motor fuel, starting with a reduction in debt service due to lower debt payments required, which is great. You will see an add in capital maintenance of $19.1 million. And I'd like to remind you that in 22, we actually reduced that amount. We actually reduced a greater amount due to backfilling with some of the corona relief funding that came through, the COVID funding that came through about a year ago. And we were able to do capital maintenance with those dollars. So this add back is part of trying to reestablish the base back to where it needs to be. And I'll show you on the next slide, there's also transportation fees going toward that. But let me move down this slide for a minute. I'm sorry, go back. Thank you. These other programs below capital maintenance, all the way down to LMIG, are reflective of the $5,000 pay increase in other recruitment and retention dollars, again, to try to address workforce needs. LMIG is representative of the 10% LMIG or excise allocation, which is now at $200 million for distribution to local governments. And let me speak to planning just for a moment. As you can see, that's a deduct. That includes a reduction of the base from last year of a $500,000 regional planning study. And then the rest of it is adding back for the $5,000 in recruitment and retention efforts. So it netted out to be a minus $313,000. So don't worry, planning's not taking a haircut. It was just taking back out the $500,000 one time that was put in last year. And we move on down into payments to Serta. You see a decrease of $12.69 million there, again, due to lower debt service, and also as Serta implemented the bond program last year, where we were previously having to fund dollars to Serta for tolling operations. They've bonded for that now, so we no longer have to cover that cost. And that leaves motor fuel at $2.008 billion. The next slide deals with transportation fees and ride shares. Again, we're breaking these down by fund source. So in payments to ATL, you can see the $171,000 increase. That's for salary increases, retirement, and also the Teamworks billing. In intermodal, you can see we started with a base of 24.106 million, and then you can see a deduct to zero that out. The reason for that is we're not getting rid of intermodal, thank goodness, but it's to reestablish budgets in intermodal by modal program, being airport, waterways, rail, and transit. And that becomes important because of the different fee structures and the trust funds that have been set up for transportation fees and rideshare fees. So it makes it a little easier from an accounting point of view, and certainly from a transparency point of view, which is always critically important. So let me start there. Airport aid sees a reduction of about $1 million due to a one-time funding that was added into FY22. And then in transit, the changes to that budget or to basically adjust the $5,000 increase and some other recruitment and retention opportunities. It also had a reduction of $1 million for the freight and logistics planning program that we're working through to be complementary of the e-commerce and freight commission work that was commissioned last year. So that is funded and we're underway with that. And also it has a recognition of the total rideshare fees now totaling $15.92 million in rideshare fees, of which about 12.5 ultimately will be over to the ATL for their purposes that they've identified. So that's sort of a breakout of where those dollars are. The bottom table are the non-intermodal transportation fee uses. Again, payments to Serta was reduced, as I said before, due to lower debt and them using bonds to advance their tolling services and operations. Then the GEO bond debt reduced, which again is a debt curve falling off, which is good. And then very importantly, as I spoke to capital maintenance previously, is an add back of $66.2 million back into that capital maintenance to replace what we previously used the corona relief dollars for to do our capital program last year. So this rebuilds our base back to a total of $145.6 million for capital maintenance, which is obviously very important. So, Mr. Chairman, this concludes my presentation, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. And as always, we certainly look forward to working with our subcommittees moving forward as the budget process moves forward, and glad to answer any of your questions or comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have a couple of questions in the audience. Senator Watson.
Thank you, Commissioner McMurray. Appreciate your presentation. I just wanted to follow up on the Federal Infrastructure Act. I mean, it's a little disappointing, and yet I know you related that it was a nice problem to have, and that our bridges are in better shape than the rest of the nation, and that we're going to get the lowest share of all the other 50 states. So sort of good news, bad news from that perspective. Having said that, is there something that we can do to take advantage of the discretionary funds or the matches or things like that that we should have or maybe do have with House Bill 170 and the future of transportation relating to the bilateral or the legislation that was just passed?
Thanks, Senator Watson. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how these discretionary programs get rolled out and when. I can affirm to you, though, to compete for discretionary, you're going to have to put skin in the game. So discretionary, you usually can't use your existing federal to match federal discretionary. So having motor fuel or transportation fees will absolutely be critical to compete for those discretionary programs. And some of those are big, especially from your part of the world. There is a program for multi-state projects of interest, such as maybe a crossing across the Savannah River or some big project like that one state doesn't have the capabilities for. So there's some programs like that, but it's going to take additional match to do things like that. And so those will be opportunities we'll have to see as those programs are developed and rolled out. And again, we'll continue to be strategic as it relates back to bridges and leveraging these federal programs where we can. And we do anticipate probably putting more of these bridges that we're doing with state dollars into the federal program to take the leverage of that, 80-20 kind of proposal. The one program I did show you for local bridges actually is 100% match on those. So we'll certainly try to take advantage of that to get county roads and city streets bridges, replaced. Again, it's like I said, it's a good problem and a bad problem. It's we've got the lowest level appropriated to states for bridges, and because our bridges are in better condition than some of our peers, but at the same time, we still have plenty to do as it relates to replacing bridges.
Well, Mr. Commissioner, we're up against the time and everything. We do have a few more questions, but I want to ask our members if they will to reach out to you or to Josh as he's around here as well. But I do want to thank y'all for being with us today. I know y'all have had an incredibly long weekend. And you need to go home and get a little bit of sleep because you may have another incredibly long weekend coming up. Hopefully not. But watching the weather at lunchtime, it does look like the next one might be a little south of here. So who knows what it's going to wind up being. But thank y'all so much for being with us today. And again, thank you to your folks that have done such an incredible job over this last weekend. And we were seeing brine trucks all over the place, and then salt and sand and a little bit of rock over places yesterday as well. And my hat is off to y'all and to the dedicated folks that have made sure that we could get around. Thank you much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, our next presenter is on board, I think, and ready to go. And that is Commissioner Spencer Moore of the Department of Driver Services. He'll be joining us online as well. And so, Commissioner Moore, thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to provide a report for the Department of Driver Services, and just thank you on behalf of the committed men and women of the department for your support, not just this past year, but for many years as we continue our focus. So I'm gonna do my best, and I see that the presentation is up. However, I'm not seeing my ability to drive it at the moment. So, all right, we got someone who can drive it. Okay, first thing I want to start with is just an overview of the department. This past year, just like all years, we have been extremely focused on providing fast, efficient, and most of all, secure services for the state. It's hard to believe, but we are now a full decade from implementing Real ID. And we continue to lead the country, if you'll note with the presentation in the first slide, in the number of Georgians that we have Real ID enrolled. This is the highest vetting opportunity that we can provide for our citizens in order for them to continue to be able to go into federal buildings as well as to domestically travel without the presentation of a passport. And while many states struggle, continue to struggle with getting their citizens Real ID enrolled, we have more than 99% of Georgians enrolled in this program. Next up, I always like to provide this because most people don't know, but Georgia is a very, very high number of valid license holders in our state, which is a good thing. It also means that many of our citizens hold state-issued credentials. I will say of that 8 million valid license holder, 386,000 of them are CDL holders. This is a focus that the department continues to work with, along with other public and private partners, and to ensure that we increase those numbers. And we have we're very committed to finding ways that we can work with the CDL community in order to streamline any processes that we have at DDS. Of course, most of those regulations are federal. We managed to serve 2.6 million customers face-to-face in the midst of a pandemic. And just like every other commissioner who has come before you, workforce challenges do exist. Any service-oriented business, I'm sure at the moment, is struggling with the same challenge. We are doing the very best that we can to continue to process customers as efficiently and as fast as we can. But in some centers, based on the day and the time, that can be challenging. Because if we lose a team member to COVID, typically we're losing at least 3 to 4 because of the proximity for which they work with each other. So they're very close in proximity, and others in the building will have to quarantine. We promote and continue to promote our online services, which literally is one of the best ways in which you can complete a renewal. And we certainly in this presentation will discuss additional technology that we've have piloted and started working with in order to help our customers get served efficiently. Tuesday continues to be our busiest day. It's sort of no different than traffic. If all customers show up on Tuesday morning between the hours of 8 and 10 a.m., which is typically the big rush for our customer base, that's the time period for which we struggle the most. But Wednesday and Thursday are the most efficient days in which you can come in and get services. Those numbers tend to go down dramatically after Tuesday. I did want to show on this map, obviously the locations in which we currently provide DDS services around the state. I also wanted to note, while we currently serve in 67 locations around the state, we will be adding 2 more locations. Very excited for that. We will be adding a site, hopefully in 2022 or first quarter of 2023 in Douglasville, for which that site will also be a CDL site. And we'll be adding a new location in Hazelhurst, Georgia, which is South Georgia, and in the same time period. So we are increasing services, especially for the CDL community. Douglas County represents the only county in which we that is the top 15% in volume of citizens in our state, where we don't currently have a center. So we're happy this will provide some relief in some locations such as Marietta, as well as Atlanta, that will be very, very helpful for the citizens. We can move to the next slide. In discussion about the amended budget, again, one of the biggest challenges we've traditionally seen at DDS is workforce in recruitment and retention. We are certainly happy with the governor's recommendation of the $5,000 cost of living, because as you'll see in a slide that will follow here shortly, this is an area that has traditionally struggled in our agency as far as the starting salary and attracting persons to come in and work for us. So allowing for these additional dollars will help. I do want to first and foremost thank the General Assembly as well as the governor for supporting a $2,000 increase for those employees who make less than $50,000 in our agency, which is more than 85% of the organization. So we're extremely thankful for that help. Next, you'll see $125,000 for funds in a request for the annual usage of a contact center voice bot. This is in our license issuance program. Last year, you approved funding for us to seek technology in which we could answer calls a little bit more efficiently than we have in the past, based surely on staffing and the number of calls that we received. We were happy to implement the dollars that were provided in a solution that was provided from Microsoft, and certainly with the help of GTA in getting that program underway. It has been extremely successful, and I'll speak to those numbers here shortly. And these are funds that continue for the annual usage fee for the program. So the equipment is bought, the programming is completed, and this is for a current year in ongoing dollars, the $125,000, in order to keep this moving forward. And our last request, and the biggest request in the amended, as well as additional assistance in the 23 budget, is for technology. We are seeing that Georgia is obviously a growing state, and one of the very first services that most people come to get when they move to Georgia is a credential, because they need that in order to get a tag, et cetera. So while our state is increasing in size, our examiner workforce has decreased over the last number of years. However, we have found out through research that there is the ability to acquire self-service kiosks for those customers, especially who come into our lobby for the no other reason than to renew a license for which they've already been provided and they've already been vetted in order to receive. So we are requesting funds for the addition of 15 self-service kiosks in our highest volume locations that, again, will allow for that customer not to have to wait on one of our team members in order to serve them, but just similarly as you might see at a Home Depot, Walmart, or wherever you get your services from, the opportunity for that customer to be served by that technology. And we think this will be a very helpful process. Again, this is our 2022 amended request. Next slide. One of the things that we've talked over the years is about our team member salaries. And as of 7/1, we were able to get some of those floors up. But as you can see, the $5,000 that will be added as a cost of living adjustment will be extremely, as well as recruitment and retention, will be extremely helpful for these positions. These are our toughest positions to recruit. You can see the turnover numbers are high, 60% for the contact center agent and the driver examiner one. It takes them about 18 months to go from examiner one to examiner two. If we can get them to examiner two over that 18-month period, the turnover is less, but nonetheless, it's extremely high. And these members provide some very, very important responsibilities for our state. Next slide. One of the requests again for this voice bot that I mentioned that is currently underway. DDS has one of the busiest contact centers in our state. Obviously, we are not just receiving calls from persons within the state. In some cases, we are receiving calls from persons that may be out of state, who are potentially thinking about moving to the state, who have recently moved from our state to another state, who still need service. And that's what our contact center agents provide. Currently, we're a staff of 55 full-time employees. We currently have 19 vacancies, which is a high turnover rate. And you saw the salary in the previous slide. So it's a very difficult job to recruit. On average, we do have 46 agents working full-time, but in order to, agents would need to answer almost 200 calls a day in order to handle the volume. Their goal is right at 100 because we've seen with breaks and lunches, et cetera, that's about the number on average that they can handle. So without the bot, we were in pretty dire position. Last year, again, in Amended, we had the $600,000 that was added in order for us to start the technology. We were finally able to get through the programming process and get it procured after July 1st and stand it up on November 22nd of this year. And next slide. After standing it up, if you will see in that bottom right corner, you'll note that we were able to handle 80,000+ calls with the bot. 73,000 of those calls were answered without an agent assistance. So we have, of the calls that the bot was able to help us handle, they were handling those calls with 91% accuracy without the help of one of our agents. We have been throttling this process until we can get it fully implemented. So we expect those numbers that are answered by the bot to continue to go up. Again, we have partnered with Microsoft. They have been a tremendous assistance in helping us to deploy this solution. And we are asking for $125,000 in order to continue those ongoing costs that are associated with the implementation of the voice bot. Next slide. The biggest request, as I mentioned, is the request for a self-service kiosk to go first in centers, and then I will speak shortly about a partnership with our friends over at the Department of Revenue, for which we share a back-end system in drives. Our Metro Atlanta locations, again, are always our busiest business centers because of the services that they provide and the number of people that they have to support. But many of the requests for customers are simple requests. There are requests that don't require interaction with a person. So our card vendor today currently has the ability to offer what you see in the picture, a self-service kiosk in which an individual can not only go up to this kiosk, simply swipe a driver's license that they currently have and take the required photo and be immediately issued on the spot and leave the center again without having to have contact with one of our individuals. As you might imagine, this will provide increased efficiency for our staff and our staff load. So we are really looking forward to implementing this technology if approved by the Assembly. Next slide. As of now, based on the stars, again, of our busiest location, you can see them listed on the right. those are the locations in which we anticipate initially implementing the self-service kiosk. If you'll note the volume, just the sheer volume of renewals year over year from 2019 to 2021, the impact could be substantial. We fully expect that, like any of our services that we offer online today, every customer will not want to use the kiosk. And for those customers, we understand, and we will have staff available to assist those. But for those who are willing to use a kiosk, we plan to have that technology available if approved, and we think that it will provide great efficiency. Roughly the cost of one of these kiosks is the cost of an examiner. Yet, unlike the requirements of the examiner, things like breaks and lunches aren't factored in. The potential or need for use of leave, such as sick leave or annual leave, does not factor in. So you potentially get much more processing of transactions through the self-service kiosks. Next project will be we are seeking assistance with the purchase of programming dollars. Essentially, the Department of Revenue and its Motor Vehicle Division has done an outstanding job in their partnership with Kroger to deploy the opportunity for technology to help renew a tag. We've seen that beneficial, and I have personally utilized those services. Now that our agencies are on the same back-end system for vehicle and driver services, we have the capability to leverage what DOR has already pioneered for driver's license renewals. So we are requesting dollars that will help us achieve that functionality over the next several months. Next slide. Our last, and this is pretty much a repeat of all the things that I mentioned in the amended, with the exception of one item that you will note at the very end, which is reduced funds for one-time funding for CDL pad in Southeast Georgia. We certainly support the governor's recommendation. At the same time, I did want to allow the committee to know that with the increasing costs of construction, it's going to be highly doubtful that a single cost of $1.2 million is going to be sufficient in order to build a building, as well as pave about 4 to 5 acres in order to put a CDL pad in Southeast Georgia. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I certainly yield my time, and I am happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you, Commissioner. There are no questions in the audience and none online. I want to appreciate, again, your work, and thank you for your presentation on what's going on in your department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Look forward to carrying on this conversation in subcommittees.
Yes, sir.
Our next presenter is Director Tim Larimore from the Georgia Forestry Commission. Director Larimore, are you? No, he's in the back right here. Gotcha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Tiller, and Chairman England, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. You know, I know I look fairly young, but I've had several careers, moves, and several different positions in the forest products sector and even in state government. But never have I worked a place that on my 1-year anniversary have I had the honor to come talk to the Appropriations Joint Committee. So today is my 1-year anniversary, and what a gift you guys have given me to come speak to you today. So I appreciate that. Thank you for all the committee members' support and invitation to be here.
We actually scheduled them this way, knowing what we did. We wrote the state constitution so that this would fall exactly on your one year anniversary. And thank you for recognizing it. So it misses so many other people. We're so glad you recognized it.
It's quite a gift, and yeah, I knew you had planned that. So thank you for that. Mr. Chairman. No, it's a great day to be here, and, it's quite the honor to serve our state as the director for the Forestry Commission. And before I get started, I just want to say I wish our 40 guys and gals that have been up in Northeast Georgia on chainsaws, clearing roads, safe travels on their way home today. They've been up there serving those communities and helping those communities get back to normal and recover from the snow and ice. So thank you for our team that's been up there. I also want to say that I've got Michelle Gray with me today, our Director of Administration. She's got 11 years of experience with the organization. So Michelle, thank you for being here, and any hard questions Michelle gets to handle. So good to be here. But it's really a good time to be a Georgian. The Braves are champions. The Dogs are champions. Georgia's a great place to do business, and I'm proud to let you know that forestry in Georgia is still #1 in the nation as well. So there's lots of things for us here in Georgia to be grateful for. As I shared with you earlier, I have the pleasure of being the director, and I have had no greater honor in my career to support the 528 employees that go to work for the Forestry Commission all around our state in the communities that many of you represent. They get up every day and go to work hard for us, and I'm proud of the work and proud of the job that they do on our behalf in making our state better and making our forest in Georgia better. I know there's a lot for me to talk about, and I'm not going to get into much of that today on the committee, but I will offer this. Some of you have taken me up on this already, and others of you that have not. If you want to learn more about some of the best people that our state has working for us, I encourage you to reach out to me. I'll be glad to host you for a tour and introduce you to what forestry in Georgia looks like and what the Georgia Forestry Commission does on a daily basis. Anytime during the year, I'll be glad to accommodate any of those tours, and just know that's an opportunity available for you to learn how we are serving your constituents back in the communities where you live. I would like to touch on 4 items from last year that I believe that you'd find interest in. All 4 of these items were things that we discussed here last year and throughout the legislative session. Our focus on safety as the Forestry Commission has always been paramount and always been a priority. Our folks fight wildfires. They operate heavy equipment. Their office is in the forest, and with that comes inherent dangers, venomous snakes, stump holes. There's opportunity for our employees to be hurt at work, and we've always had safety as a priority. Last year, when I joined the organization, it became apparent when we looked at our work comp claims that we were having an increase in injuries on the job. So we've taken a really proactive approach at trying to address those issues that we identified and really reduce job injuries and the impact that those injuries are having on our workers' comp premiums. The first thing I'd like to mention is that we moved our safety officer out of our human resources department, where it had been housed for some time, into the office of our deputy director, the #2 in charge. And that has really elevated the value and the focus and the priority that safety has had across our organization. The other thing I'm really happy about is that we've created and are in the initial stages of a campaign, Safety is Our Anchor Point. Anchor point is a common wildfire term. It's a location, usually a natural barrier to fire spread, where firefighters start constructing a fire break in the wild. I think that's going to resonate well with our people. We're developing posters, developing presentations, and developing training focused on that to really hone in on safety of our wildland firefighters in our organization. So extremely proud of the work that our safety officer is doing underneath the guidance and leadership of our deputy director. The second thing I'd like to talk to you about are 2 legislative initiatives that this body had asked us to take on last year. One was to create a timber harvesting ordinance notification website that would allow timber harvesters to uniformly, no matter what county they're operating in, notify counties that they have a timber harvesting operation in that county, and then also to let them know when that harvesting operation has ceased. It's really just bringing things into the modern age and allowing technology to improve efficiency in the supply chain. That website is being launched today. I'm excited about that and pleased to announce that to this body today. Secondly, this body asked us to expand Georgia's carbon registry to include for the accounting of carbon credits associated with sustainable building materials in commercial construction. This is the first of its kind in the country. I'll say that again. This is the first of its kind in this country. We've started the process. We've established a 7-member technical advisory committee chaired by Mr. Russell Gentry of Georgia Tech. This is a big job. It's a big deal, and it's important for us to get it right. I anticipate this work going on through the remainder of the year. And my hope and my goal and the stated goal I've given to this technical advisory committee is to have this available and have it up and running next year at this time. And we really believe that our protocol developed here in Georgia at the direction of this body will spur sustainable development and serve as a blueprint for other states and our nation. And then lastly, I want to talk about something you've heard this organization bring up many times, and that's making payments for overtime earned by our employees as they respond to federal incidents, helping our neighbors out west put out wildfires. When I was onboarding with this organization last year, I heard a lot about it, and I dug into this issue and learned a lot about the issue. And I'm proud to announce that we've implemented a policy inside our agency that we will pay employees within 30 days of them returning from a federal wildfire incident. In previous years, for decades, it could take up to 6, 9, 12 months for our employees to get paid for their time and for the money that they had earned when they went out on federal wildfire incidents. I'm proud to say that we had over 70 employees go out west last year, and about 95% of those employees were paid within 90 days of their service. And that's a policy that we intend to continue going forward. We're doing it through managing our cash flow closely and through renegotiating our reimbursement terms with the U.S. Forest Service, and we're thankful for the partnership that we have with the U.S. Forest Service. Western assignments are a win for our employees and our agency. Training, new roles, and valuable experience are gained by our employees, and it allows our employees to earn some additional income while going out and serving other communities. And the most important thing about them going out on Western wildfires is they gain critical and valuable experience that they bring back home to our organization to help us be better when we have future incidents here at home. And because of the change that we've made in this policy, anecdotally, we are hearing that we will have more than 70 employees go out west next year. And I think that's a win for our organization, a win for our employees, and a win for our state. And we'll partner with our employees and allow that as long as conditions here at home allow for our employees to go out west. Next, I'd like to provide 3 quick program updates. Protection, forest protection is how we mitigate wildfires and we prevent wildfires in our state. We served over 5,800 landowners in our state. 4,000 of those landowners we installed fire breaks for, and we assisted over 1,700 landowners with prescribed burns. Last year we had over 2,400 wildfires in our state, burning slightly over 12,000 acres. This was unseasonably low and well below our five-year average of 3,200 fires and 22,000 acres burned. There was over 1.3 million acres of prescribed burning done across Georgia's landscape as well, and we participated directly in 150,000 acres of that. Real briefly, the wildfire outlook in our state, the bottom 2/3 of our state, Forecasters are predicting above normal fire season this spring. And so we're closely monitoring that and ensuring that our resources are available and ready for a pending increasingly dangerous fire season. Forest management, we have foresters that serve our state. BMP data, best management practices. We know forests are really the most desirable land use in protecting Georgia's water quality. There's no doubt about it. The science tells that. We randomly selected 260 sites totaling 50,000 acres, and we inspected for best management practice implementation. And I'm proud to let you know that that survey demonstrated that there's over right at 93% implementation and really achieving an A score on those as a result of that audit. So our forest product sector, the harvesters that are out serving our state and supporting the forest products industry are doing a great job. Forest health is an issue for us. We conducted a southern pine beetle survey. Many of us in this room may not have heard of a southern pine beetle for some time because we really have not had an issue with beetle infestation here in our state. But that is a real threat to our state's forest, and it's something that we monitor every year. This year it was, again, unseasonably low, and we do that survey by aerial and by aerial reconnaissance, and we flew over 5,000 miles and visually looked at over 5 million acres. And proud to tell you that our state had 8 southern pine beetle spots, and we worked directly with those forest owners to mitigate those spots when they're identified. Our foresters completed over 7,700 cases or visits with landowners in our state, covering over 600,000 acres. And then the last program area I would just want to mention to you is every year we partner with Georgia Tech to update the Forest Economic Impact Report. And these are some astounding numbers, but I think they're things that oftentimes maybe we talk about them a little bit so often that they become maybe a little bit not as sensitive to them as we should. But Georgia's total output from its forest product sector is $39.1 billion. That is a 7% increase from 2019. The output has increased for over 10 consecutive years. The forest industry has supported 140,000 jobs in the past year. Total compensation for Georgians that are employed in the forest product sector exceed $9 billion. That's a 6% increase over 2019. And when I said earlier Georgia's forestry position in the country is still number one, it truly is, and the metrics demonstrate that. The other number I just want to point out to you is that the forest industry, through this report, it shows that we have provided the state with over $180 million in tax revenue back to our state. In previous years, the last time I stood in front of you, that number was $106 million just last year. So it's nearly an $80 million input increase into our state's tax revenue. So I'll finish up and I'll shift my focus to to our budget. Most of the budget items that are centered around the governor's initiatives, and I am extremely pleased and extremely supportive of the amended fiscal year 22 request and the fiscal year 23 request. For fiscal year 22, the governor's 5,000 pay increase initiative, which includes $3 million, aside from the $5 million pay increase, cost of a living adjustment for employees in the amended fiscal year 22, you'll see that on page 205, there's a $3 million line item in there for replacement of firefighting equipment. And that is essentially moving a bond request that we had made for moving that forward to the amended fiscal year 22 budget. and that's for 7 Dozer tractors, 3 truck tractors, and then 8 lowboy trailers to haul equipment. For fiscal year 23, Governor Kemp's budget proposal before us today includes the support of GSC for $4.96 million. And that is aligned with our agency's needs, and it's something that we started making known to the governor's office and the governor's team 4 to 5 months ago, and we're pleased to see the governor's bold action and including this enterprise recommendation in his budget proposal. 4.5 of the fiscal year 23 increase is associated with the pay increase of $5,000, an increase into the 401 contribution, and the added benefit of withdrawal of 40 hours of annual leave. And I'd just like to make a special note about the increase of 401 contribution. I've heard directly from 2 of our employees over the last week how valuable and how important that particular component of the governor's proposal can be for retention going forward. The 9% match is pretty powerful and is something that is not often seen. So I'm excited to see that and see the implications that will have going forward. You'll also see that there's $409,000 included in protection, and in $385,000 of that is in protection, and that is replacing federal funds that was part of the austerity cuts back a year and a half ago. So we're excited to see that get added back in. And then also there's a $24,000 line item in forest management that is aimed at training and really part of our employment, engagement, and retention strategy that I believe are essential to retention of our current employees. Bond funds are on the tracking sheet, and they approximately total $2.5 million for fiscal year 23, and therefore major improvements and renovations, and then also one office construction project in Long Liberty County, Georgia. In closing, I'd like to just, I guess, leave us with a few stats and give you guys on the committee an idea of where GFC sits today and why I believe that the governor's initiatives are on target. Just let these soak in as I go through them. 75% of our professional foresters at GFC have less than 3 years of experience. Nearly 60% of our wildland firefighters have less than 5 years of experience. 17% of our workforce is eligible for retirement in less than 5 years. I say that because these are skilled, technical, and professional positions that support Georgia and support Georgia's forestry sector, which supports many of the communities that you represent and the constituents that you represent. It's critical that we begin, and I believe what the governor's proposing is a great beginning to address those issues that I lay before you. If we want our children and our grandchildren to enjoy these great forests that we have in our state, because I believe that the great forest and the great forest economy that we have in our state didn't happen by accident. I believe that the Georgia Forestry Commission and its team of employees played a great part in making Georgia Forest and Georgia Forestry what it is today. In addition to the governor's initiatives that have been well laid out by those that come before me and by me today, we plan to partner alongside his initiatives and introduce additional opportunities inside the GFC that I've seen work in previous employers in the private sector around engagement and development, career paths, and addressing salary compression issues. To me, I believe those are key elements for retention and for continuing to attract and the best and brightest employees that we can attract. We appreciate the governor's proposed budget, and we offer our full support for it, and we request your full support for his initiatives as well. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Director, for being with us. We are bumping up on time, but I do have one question from Chair Lady Lynn Smith, back to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it not true that the more this state becomes urbanized and the denser population moves to very few centers in our state, that we could possibly not be aware of how important what you just told us is to the citizens of Georgia, the carbon that you can sequester from then on? So thank you for your leadership, and to those who are listening, we have a great state, but that's because we have trees. Thank you.
That is the end of the comments and the questions, Director. Thank you so much for being here. And again, we're just so glad we can provide you this opportunity on your one-year anniversary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
The next presenter we have online, it's a commissioner who's represented by a really, really good senator. That's Commissioner Mark Williams. Commissioner, are you there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for inviting me to speak here today. I'm Mark Williams, Commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources, and I want to begin, as other agency heads have, by thanking our great DNR employees for the great work they did up in the affected area this weekend in Northeast Georgia. Not only this weekend, they're still working there today, but our game management folks clearing roads, our game boards providing security and pulling folks out of the ditch with their tow straps, and then our great parks for providing warming stations at our group shelters. And Mr. Chairman and committee members will be prepared to do that if so needed this weekend as well. Hopefully not. But the Department of Natural Resources can be found on pages 265 through 273 of the governor's budget report. We have a few primary changes in our AFY 22 budget I'd like to make you aware of. First being the increased funds for a $5,000 pay increase for all full-time benefit eligible employees. The next, under the Department Administration section, we have $1,200,000 to replace 45 vehicles that have outlived their useful life. Third, under the Wildlife Resources Division, we have an addition of $871,210 for the Wildlife Endowment Trust Fund, and this is based on actual lifetime sportsman's license revenue. So that's some good news. We underestimated there. Moving along to the FY23 budget, the Department of Natural Resources can be found on pages 268 through 273 of the governor's budget report. There you'll see us annualizing the $5,000 pay increase from AFY 22. Some other statewide changes, funding to allow eligible state employees to withdraw up to 40 hours of earned annual leave annually from their accrued leave balance. The employment retirement system changes to reflect cost of living adjustments, 401k match increases, and employer share of forfeited leave for retiring employees. And then under Department Administration, you'll see $10,550,000 has been added for capital maintenance and repairs that was originally included in our bond request. And this will go for campground renovations, just to name a few: Clallan Canyon, Indian Springs, A.H. Stevens, Elijah Clark, just to name a few of those. And then the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act, we had a great year of revenue collection, so there's an increase there of $8,598,032, and it was added to, there was just an increase in sales of outdoor and sporting goods. Roughly, if you'll remember, was about $20.7 million last year. And then under state parks and historical sites, you'll see an elimination of the $2,800,000 that were one-time funds. And then more good news under Wildlife Resources, we have $1,728,350 in state funds as Wildlife Endowment Trust Fund to increase funds to reflect the 2021 collections of lifetime sportsman's license fees. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'd like to thank Governor Kemp and the legislature for taking swift action and allowing our state to be in the sound financial situation it is in today. These changes will allow for the first cost of living increase in 14 years and reward our deserving employees at DNR. This pandemic has pushed Georgians outside and highlighted the importance of our state's outdoor recreation opportunities. This past year, we again saw record visitation to our state parks and strong license and reservation sales, which we expect to continue. And I'd like to remind the chairman, both chairmen and the members of the committee that when all our neighbors closed, we stayed open. And I give the governor credit for making that call, but I really want to thank our outstanding employees. We kept every beach open. We kept every WMA open. We kept resident, non-resident hunting open. Our state park stayed open. Our boat ramps and our gun shooting ranges all stayed open, and we were the only one of our neighbors that did that. We recognized, as the governor did, that Georgians needed to get outside and recreate during this pandemic, and that's exactly what we did. So again, I'm extremely proud of how DNR pivoted in a lot of places, but performed during the pandemic. Thank you again, Chairman, for inviting me to speak, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. That's a 14-point buck if anybody's going to ask that.
Well, I do have a text message from one of our members wondering where you shot that little bitty year-and-a-half-old buck from, but anyway, I'll leave that alone.
What county? That was in Walton County. That deer was actually featured on the cover of a GON magazine at one time.
Well, now, you said it's from Walton County. He didn't drift south from Barrow County, did he?
Very likely, Chairman, very likely.
Commissioner, is that a buck named Rivian?
We love Rivian.
Thank you. We do. We got a few questions, Director Dunn. We're going to go to the questions first and then come back to you if that's okay. Chairwoman Smith.
Thank you. For my section of the room, our big question is, when did you acquire that football in front of you?
That was a present from my new son-in-law of about a month ago. That was my Christmas present, and I don't know when Mr. Alex Bradford got that from Coach Smart.
And Representative Petrie. Waves off. He must have been asking about that football as well. Oh, sorry. It was sorry, Chairman Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you. And you're so correct. During COVID, Georgia was one of the only states that kept our outdoors, our WMAs, and our other areas open. And thank goodness for that. I know we experienced increased volume out there of folks visiting not only our parks but our WMAs and utilizing the areas for hunting and fishing. I think it probably kept Georgia a little more sane than most other states because we did. But having said that, again, as we and hunters have always had the conservation efforts and the money, want to make sure we're managing those areas the best that we can be so that we can have more hunters, more fishermen enjoy Georgia's great outdoors and the wildlife that we have here. So one question I have is in Gosha, that was one of the purposes was, outdoor stewardship, conservation. Are we expecting to put more management into our WMA areas and our fishing areas so that, again, we can manage those so we can have more capacity and access for Georgia hunters and fishermen?
Great question, Chairman Knight. Yeah, we added, with GOSA last year, we were able to add 24,000 acres down in southeast Georgia in Camden County with the Ceylon WMA. And we also had some great private partners that added stewardship dollars in with that. And so that always helps, but we let our land decision, our land acquisition decisions be driven by wildlife resources. Ted Will is the best one to assess how many acres with current staffing that we can manage, because as you well know, getting the land's one thing, but managing it for the wildlife and the habitat, it takes staff and labor. And so we feel like we're in a good place. But again, I want to thank some of our private sector folks that have come in with stewardship dollars on some of these acquisitions. But even in this year's GOSA, the GOSA slate of projects the trustees have voted on it. It now goes to the DNR board. They'll be voting on it a week from this Friday, and then it'll come to the appropriations chairs. But there is land acquisition in that list.
And one additional question, Chairman. And again, Commissioner, you know I spoke about this because we're very passionate. Both of us are passionate about the Georgia Great Outdoors. But I know part of the GOSA and part of my support for it, both during and after we passed it, to put it on the constitutional amendment and get it passed, was also a portion of that was we could use that money to manage our existing acreage. And I guess that's the part where I'm going to is, what is the layout, and maybe what is going to be, if you could maybe get us a copy of what's going to be voted on before the board as far as what our expenditures are going to be this year, and make sure that we could use part of that to manage our existing resources, not necessarily acquiring new ones.
Absolutely. And I agree with you, and I'll get a list out probably Monday week. Our board will take it up a week from this Friday. And I didn't mean to say that GOSA cannot fund stewardship. I was just thinking we do have some private partners that put money in the deals too, specifically for stewardship. So great question.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I believe, Commissioner, you have extinguished all the questions. Thank you again for coming and being a part of the presentation. We look forward to following up with you more in subcommittee reports.
Thank you.
Director Dunn.
Good afternoon, Chairman Tillery, Chairman England, members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for having me here this afternoon. And I'm fully aware of the time schedule. The programming ends at 4:20, so I'll be sure we meet that goal. I'm here to talk about the Environmental Protection Division budget. We administer 3 programs that are contained within the Department of Natural Resources budget. Those programs are Environmental Protection, Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, and the Solid Waste Trust Fund. For all 3 programs, the base budget is about $124 million in total funds, of which about $40 million, or about 32%, is appropriated state funds. I'll start off with the amended budget. In the governor's recommendation, you'll find our 3 programs on pages 266 and 267 in the governor's budget report. There are 3 items under the program Environmental Protection. Item 1 is the state funds portion of the $5,000 per employee pay increase, which is roughly $1.1 million. I know you've heard a lot about the importance of these funds to stem the turnover problems that many agencies are facing. We're no different. I know for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, we've had a turnover rate that approaches 23.5% if annualized. We've had 81 separations, and 85 of those separations are due to folks going to another job. Almost always, without fail, that other job is at a substantially higher pay rate. It's not uncommon to be 30, 40, 50% higher. So that is greatly needed. Item 2 is a true-up of the budget authority for the water supply storage costs for Lake Lanier that was provided in amended fiscal year 19. Back in 2017, the Army Corps of Engineers approved the state of Georgia's request to reallocate storage in Lake Lanier for the region's municipal and industrial water supply needs. When the funds were appropriated in the amended fiscal year 19 budget, it was based upon the estimate that the cost for the state's reserve pool would be around $14 million. That contract between the state and the Corps was not actually executed until 2021, and once executed, the storage costs were revised up to around $16.5 million, and the annual operation and maintenance costs were slightly higher than anticipated. The budget line item you see in amended fiscal year 22, $2.787 million, is simply to align budget with actual cost. I do want to point out that as the storage in the state's reserve pool is allocated to water supply providers over the next 25 years, these state storage costs will be recouped and returned to Treasury. So this is just a somewhat temporary item. Item number 3 under Environmental Protection Division is our capital request, which is proposed to be funded in the cash budget. And that capital request, $687,500, is for the replacement of 25 trucks and SUVs in our fleet. Each of these vehicles have mileage well above 100,000 and are over 10 years old, so this is just a normal part of fleet management. And the remaining $733,000 is for 8 pieces of lab equipment for our lab out in Peachtree Corners. There are no changes in the amended fiscal year budget for the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund or the Solid Waste Trust Fund. In the big budget, our programs can be found on pages 268, 269, and 270 of the Governor's Budget Report. I'll start off with the Environmental Protection Program, which has a number of changes. Items 1, 2, and 3 are all statewide changes related to the Governor's Recruitment and Retention Initiative that I talked about before. The first item annualizes the pay increase. The second item provides for state funds for early payout of accrued leave. And the third item are changes to the ERS employer contribution rate. Item number 4 is also a statewide change. It is an adjustment to agency payments to the statewide risk pool administered by DOAS. And again, this is a small change there based primarily upon claims experience. Item number 5 is related to the water storage contract with Army Corps for Lake Altoona. I know Commissioner Nunn discussed this in his presentation earlier. This is very similar to the Lanier contract that I just discussed for the amended fiscal year budget. We're just a few years later in the process. This August, the Corps of Engineers approved our request to reallocate additional storage in Lake Altoona to meet the additional water supply needs of Cartersville and Cobb-Marietta water systems. In the DCA 1 Georgia budget for the amended fiscal year 22, that's on page 125 in the governor's budget, the governor provides funds for the anticipated costs of the state reserve pool of approximately $1.7 million. These storage costs are one-time costs. Once we pay off the storage expense, that storage belongs to the state of Georgia and its water supply providers. There is $4,800, however, annualized in EPD's budget that you see here that represent annual O&M costs, operation and maintenance costs associated with the contract, and that's something we have to pay out every year, so it's going to be in the base budget. Moving down to the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund program, that item aligns the budget with fees collected from the 75-cent per ton tipping fee at landfills. You recall HB 511 from last session dedicated these fees to the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. Last year, $7.6 million in tipping fees were collected, and the budget modification you see there, which is actually a reduction in $724,000 to the base, simply aligns the base budget with fiscal year 21 collections. And the final item in the Solid Waste Trust Fund program also aligns budget with fees collected with the $1 tire replacement fee. Again, the tire replacement fee was dedicated to the Solid Waste Trust Fund by HB 511 last session. Last year's collections were also $7.6 million, so the budget adds about $4.8 million to the existing $2.8 million base. Mr. Chairman, those are the changes for EPD proposed in the governor's budget, and I'd be more than happy to try to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Director. Let's see, first, do we have any questions online? None online. Any questions in the audience? Looks like the room is clear, Director. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Good to be last.
Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We have reached the end of the agenda for today. you know we start tomorrow morning again at 9 a.m. with Justice Namias and the Supreme Court, and we'll run through many of our court agencies, corrections, et cetera, and other public safety agencies again tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. And we look forward to seeing you there. Chairman England, do you have any other wrap-up comments for today?
Just one housekeeping issue. All the presentations from today will be posted at the end of business of each day of these hearings on the House Budget and Research Office website. So if you missed something, want to go back and catch what somebody said again or something like that, they will be available there.
Thank you again for your time and attention. We'll see you tomorrow morning.